I wasn't supposed to be there. Not at the country club, not among the chandeliers and champagne, and certainly not at someone else's wedding. But fate, or maybe a very pushy roommate with a 102-degree fever, had other plans. Madison, my extroverted best friend, had scored an invitation to a high-profile wedding through one of her PR clients. She was thrilled about it for weeks. But the night before, she was curled up in bed under 3 blankets, shivering and pale, her voice rasping as she looked at me with pleading eyes. "Ellie, just go in my place," she croaked. "You'll love it. Free food. Pretty dress. It's the biggest event in the city this weekend. I don't even know the bride," I protested. "Or the groom, or anyone." She waved a shaky hand. "No one will care. Just eat the cake and pretend you belong." That's how I, Ellie Carson, shy, awkward, serial overthinker, ended up at the most extravagant wedding I had ever seen, clutching a borrowed clutch and praying no one asked who I was. The country club looked like something out of a royal movie. Ivory silk draped the walls, chandeliers sparkled like galaxies overhead, and string instruments played in a far-off corner. People floated around in custom suits and couture dresses, sipping wine and laughing like life had never handed them a hard day. I took the seat furthest from the aisle, near a marble column, and tried to make myself invisible. The woman next, to me, draped in pearls and silk, glanced over politely. I gave her a tight-lipped smile and immediately pulled out my phone to text Madison. "Are you sure this is the right address? This crowd looks like Vogue and Wall Street had a baby." She replied with a sick emoji and a thumbs up. I sighed and tried to blend in. Maybe if I just watched the ceremony quietly, ate a slice of cake, and slipped out unnoticed, no one would ever know I was an imposter. But then I noticed something strange. The names on the wedding program said Julian Cordell and Alexa Matthews. That wasn't right. "Excuse me," I whispered to the woman beside me, my voice barely audible over the hum of conversation. "Is this the Walker Bennett wedding?" She gave me a puzzled look. "This is the Matthews Cordell wedding, dear." My stomach dropped. I had walked into the wrong wedding. Panic rose in my throat like a wave. My hands trembled. I stood up quickly, heart pounding, face flushing red. I needed to leave. Now. But before I could take a single step, a deep voice echoed from the altar, amplified by the microphone. "There she is." Everyone turned to look. I froze in place, stunned. The groom, tall, dark-haired, devastatingly handsome, stood at the front of the aisle, eyes locked onto mine. His smile was small, mysterious, but unmistakably aimed at me. "My real bride," he said. Laughter rippled through the audience. A few gasped. Someone whispered, "Is this part of the vows?" I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't even blink. Julian Cordell, the groom, the billionaire CEO who had once graced the cover of Forbes as the man who rewrote the rules of tech, was now walking down the aisle, straight toward me. My first instinct was to run. This was clearly a mistake, some horrible prank. Or maybe he thought I was someone else. I braced myself to explain the misunderstanding, to apologize profusely, then vanish before security arrived. But Julian reached me before I could bolt. His eyes were kind, deep. He held out his hand. "I'm sorry," I stammered, trembling. I'm not supposed to be here. I came to the wrong—" "You came to the right place," he said, softly. Then he leaned close, so only I could hear him. "You just saved me." I blinked. "From what?" He smiled, but there was sadness behind it. "A mistake." The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, curious and confused. But Julian didn't seem to care. He gently took my hand and turned back to the altar. "I think we'll need a moment," he said to the officiant, then guided me away from the aisle, through a side door, and out into the garden behind the country club. As soon as we were alone, I pulled my hand away and looked at him, heart hammering in my chest. "What was that?" I asked, breathless. "What are you doing?" Julian took a breath and looked up at the sky. "Do you believe in signs?" "No," I said quickly. "I believe in not humiliating myself in front of 100 strangers, which I just did." He laughed softly. "You didn't humiliate yourself. You saved me from a very expensive, very public trap." I stared at him. "You mean the wedding?" He nodded. "It wasn't real, not to me. Alexa and our parents arranged it. It was a merger. 2 legacy families consolidating power. But love, connection, I haven't felt any of that for years." I didn't know what to say. "I was about to go through with it," he continued, "even though I knew it would be wrong. Then I saw you standing up, clearly uncomfortable, clearly not part of this world, and I saw myself, the real me, the guy who used to eat noodles in a rented closet while building code no one cared about. You reminded me." His words settled like soft thunder in my chest. "I didn't mean to crash your wedding," I whispered. He smiled. "You didn't crash it, you rerouted it." I looked around. The garden was quiet now. The tension in my chest started to melt, replaced by confusion and curiosity. "So what now?" I asked, almost afraid of the answer. Julian reached into his jacket and pulled out a silver card, his business card. I took it with shaking hands. "I want to offer you something," he said. "Not a marriage," he added quickly with a smirk, "but a chance to see my world. A real look, not the headlines, not the speeches." "Why?" I asked, frowning. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he replied. "You have no idea how rare it is to meet someone who's real in a room full of performance. Spend 1 week with me. No pressure. Just observe. Ask questions. Let me show you who I really am. And maybe you'll figure out who you are too." I should have said no. Everything logical in me screamed to walk away. But something inside me whispered differently. Maybe, just maybe, this wrong seat was the start of everything right, and so I said yes. I didn't sleep much that night. After leaving the country club, I rode the subway home with Julian Cordell's business card in my purse and 100,000 questions storming through my head. Who does that? Who walks away from $1 million wedding mid-ceremony? And more importantly, why did he choose me? By the time I reached my tiny studio apartment, my mind was a hurricane. The worn-out light fixture hummed overhead while I paced in circles. I laid the silver card on the kitchen table and stared at the raised letters. Julian Cordell, founder and CEO, Cordell Tech a week in his world. That's what he offered me. No cameras, no interviews, no strings. Just a tour behind the curtain of a billionaire's life. It sounded insane. But what gnawed at me most wasn't fear, it was curiosity. Because in those few minutes we spoke, he looked like someone barely hanging on under all that power and polish. Someone who, for some reason, felt seen when he looked at me. And deep down, beneath the panic, I felt awake. Like I'd been waiting for something to break the rhythm of my ordinary, invisible life. So I texted the number he wrote on the back of the card. 1 week. No promises. But I'm in. His reply came in under a minute. Lemonade stand. Tomorrow, noon. Don't dress. Fancy. That was unexpected. The next day I wore jeans and a t-shirt, my safest outfit for uncertain missions. I had to take 2 trains and walk 3 blocks to get to the address he sent, only to find myself in front of a chipped wooden cart, nestled between 2 office buildings in Midtown. A hand-painted sign read, Mrs. Porter's Lemonade. Since 1961, and there he was, Julian Cordell, billionaire, CEO, possibly the only man alive who could wear an old hoodie and still look like he ran a private jet fleet. He was sitting on a bench, sipping lemonade like a regular guy. When he saw me, his smile widened. Not the smirk from magazine covers, but something softer, real. I was starting to think you'd ghosted me, he said, standing up. I thought about it, I replied honestly. He laughed. Fair, we ordered. 2 lemonades and sat under the shade of a crooked umbrella. The street hummed with taxis and lunchtime chatter. But here at this tiny oasis, it felt like time slowed. You wanted me to see your world, I said. So far, it looks like a lemonade. Stand, Julian grinned. Exactly. I raised an eyebrow. You're going to need to explain. He sipped his drink, then pointed at Mrs. Porter, the 80-something-year-old woman manning the cart. She was my first investor, he said. I blinked. You're joking. Not even a little. I was 19, dropped out of college. I had a half-baked idea about a decentralized file-sharing protocol. No one would listen. No investors, no incubators, nothing. I worked nights at a diner down the street. Every morning, I'd pass this cart and buy a 50-cent lemonade. I listened, completely locked in. One day, I told her what I was building. She barely understood a word, but she said, I like your eyes. You look like you mean it. She gave me her husband's old laptop and $200, said, make something good with it. I looked over at Mrs. Porter, now handing lemonade to a teenage couple. $200, I whispered. That's all it took to start something real, he said. For the next hour, he told me stories about coding in diner booths, sleeping on friends' floors, getting his first app banned from the App Store for being too disruptive, about failing, hardened often, about clawing his way into investor meetings where they didn't even offer him water. I wasn't born into this, he said. People see the jets and headlines and think it's always been this way. But success isn't stairs. It's cliffs and ledges. Most days I was one missed rent check away from packing it all up. I believed him, because there was something in his voice, something raw, not rehearsed, not staged, just true. Then he asked me, what about you? I hesitated. No. Pressure, he added. You can tell me to shut up. But for some reason I didn't. I used to dream of being a children's book illustrator, I said quietly. That was my plan. Art school, big dreams. I even sold one sketch to a magazine once, framed the check like a trophy. What? Happened? Life, I shrugged. Dad got sick. Bills piled up. I dropped out. Took 2 jobs. Then 3. Dreams. They faded. He looked at me for a long moment. I think you still have it, he said. The spark. I looked away. Maybe. Or maybe I just got good at pretending I don't care. Julian stood. Come on. Time to meet someone. Where are we going? To see what happens when someone chooses to bet on themselves, even when the world says they shouldn't. We walked a few blocks to a building I'd passed 100 times but never noticed, a small tech incubator called the Foundry. Inside, it buzzed with energy. Young people hunched over laptops, whiteboards filled with scribbles. The smell of burnt coffee hung in the air. Julian introduced me to a girl named Rena, 19, immigrant, first-generation college student, building a mental health app for kids. Julian believed in me before I did, she told me. Gave me a tiny grant and one condition, pay it forward when I make it. I looked around. Every desk here had a story, a dream, a fight. I realized then, Julian wasn't just building tech. He was building people. And somehow he was now building me? Back on the street, I asked him, why are you showing me all this? Because I see myself in you, he said. Shy girl, wrong seat, right heart. My throat tightened. You think I could do something that matters? I think you already do, he said. But I also think you're scared of wanting to. Much. He paused, then added, this week isn't about me. It's about what wakes up in you when you see what's possible. And that's when I felt it. The first spark. Small, flickering, but alive. I thought billionaires had it all. Answers, immunity, confidence carved in stone. But by the third day in Julian's world, I realized something strange. The higher you climb, the lonelier it gets. He didn't say it outright. Men like Julian rarely do. But it was in the pauses between meetings, in the way he stared too long out windows that framed Manhattan's skyline, in the way he changed the subject whenever someone asked about his family. That day, we sat on the roof of his penthouse, the city stretching endlessly below us. He handed me a mug of jasmine tea without asking how I liked it. Somehow he already knew. "I have something to show you," he said, leading me inside to a room unlike the others. No sleek tech, no priceless art, just photographs, dozens of them, black and white prints of people, smiling, struggling, laughing, every frame bursting with raw emotion. "My mom took these," he said, running his fingers gently along the edge, of a photo of a boy holding a broken kite. She was a photojournalist. Said the world moves too fast, so you have to steal stillness whenever you can. I stared at the boy in the picture. His eyes looked so much like Julian's, sharp, but tired. "She passed when I was 15, he added, voice low. "Car. Crash. I was angry for a long time, not just at fate or God, at her, for leaving, for chasing stories and leaving me behind. I didn't speak, just listened. My dad left before I was born. Mom raised me alone. And even though we didn't have much, she never made me feel poor. She taught me to think like I mattered." He smiled faintly. "But after she died, I stopped believing that. For years, I just wanted to prove something to the world. Build a company, buy buildings, sign checks big enough to silence the pain." He turned toward the window again. None of it worked. A silence stretched between us, heavy and honest. "That's the one thing money can't fix," he said. "The ache you carry when the people who believed in you are gone." I felt a lump rise in my throat, because even though my story was different, that ache was familiar. "You ever wish you could go back?" I asked quietly. He didn't hesitate. "Every day." For a moment, he looked nothing like a billionaire. He looked like a boy still waiting for his mom to come home. I tried therapy, didn't stick. I tried meditation, mountain retreats, bought an island once, sold it 3 months later. None of it filled the hole. I swallowed hard. "So what does?" He looked at me, eyes sharper than I'd ever seen them. "Purpose," he said. "Building something that outlives me. Pouring into others what she poured into me. That's the only thing that helps." We sat in silence, side by side, the hum of the city below reminding us that life never waits. Then Julian stood. "Come on. I want to show you something different." We took a private elevator down to the garage, and a quiet chauffeur drove us across the bridge into Queens. When we arrived, I was shocked. It wasn't a skyscraper or some exclusive club. It was a modest brick building with faded green trim, an old community center with kids playing basketball outside and music leaking through open windows. "This is where I grew up," he said. "I bought the place last year when it was about to close. Now it's a free after-school program. STEM, music, art, mentorship." As we walked inside, he was greeted not like a mogul, but like a big brother. Kids ran up to hug him. A girl handed him a crayon drawing of a rocket ship. I watched him crouch down and say, "That's incredible, Jada. Did you add solar panels this time?" She beamed. "This is who you are, isn't it?" I said as we walked down the hallway. He glanced sideways. "Yeah, it just took me $1 billion to remember." I paused at a door labeled Art Studio. Inside, a teacher guided children through a watercolor exercise. Without thinking, I walked in. I felt the brushes between my fingers. The whisper of water across paper, the scent of creativity. The instructor noticed me and smiled. "You paint?" I hesitated. "I used to." She handed me a brush. "Then let's call today your restart." I sat down and began to paint. A little boy sitting by a window, much like the one in Julian's mother's photo. As I worked, Tears slid silently down my cheeks, not out of sadness, but because I realized how long it had been since I felt like me. Later that night, back at the penthouse, Julian asked me how it felt. Like breathing for the first time in years, I said. He nodded. That's how I felt the first time I gave a grant to a kid from a neighborhood like mine. We sat in companionable silence, and then he said something I'll never forget. You know, the world sees people like me and thinks we're chasing profit, but the truth is, we're all just chasing a feeling we lost somewhere. He looked at me, really looked, and sometimes we find it in the most unexpected places, like in a girl who sat in the wrong seat and ended up exactly where she was meant to be. It's funny how quickly life can feel like a dream, and how suddenly that dream can begin to unravel. For weeks, I lived in Julian's world, not as a stranger anymore, but as someone slowly discovering her place in it. He took me to quiet dinners, charity events, late-night jazz lounges where he'd whisper things that made my heart race, and I told him everything. About growing up invisible, about the days I'd sketch in secret because I didn't believe my dreams were worth seeing, about the way I used to sit in cafes and watch people live their lives, wondering if I'd ever get to live mine. And he listened, truly listened, the way no one ever had. I started to believe, for the first time in my life, that maybe, just maybe, I could belong, until she showed up. Her name was Camille. She had the kind of beauty that made rooms go quiet. Confident, poised, wrapped in a designer trench coat and effortless authority. I met her one afternoon when I stopped by Julian's office with lunch. She stood at the marble reception desk, speaking French into a phone while flipping through portfolio mock-ups. She barely glanced at me when I walked in. "You must be the charity intern," she said, with a polite, pointed smile. Before I could correct her, Julian came out of his office. "Camille," he said stiffly, "what are you doing here?" Her red lips curled. "I was in town. Figured I'd drop by." I watched his entire body language change, shoulders tensing, voice lowering. "I told you not to come by unannounced. And I told you we weren't finished," she replied. Julian caught my eyes, and in that moment, I saw something I hadn't seen in weeks. Fear. Later, in the car, I asked, "Who is she?" He sighed deeply. An old mistake. They'd been engaged, years ago. She was from a powerful family, all ties and mergers and old money. Their relationship had been less about love and more about image. She liked the idea of me, he said, but not who I really was. When he broke it off, she didn't take it well. And now, apparently, she was back, with a vengeance. The next few days were strange. Julian became distracted. Meetings ran late. His assistant kept saying he was in a call whenever I dropped by. Then the news broke. Julian Cross and Camille Devereaux spotted at charity gala. Together, a photo of them side by side, his hand on her lower back. I stared at the screen, feeling like someone had poured ice water down my spine. It didn't make sense. He hadn't even told me he was attending that event. I called. No answer. I texted. Nothing. By the third day, my heart had become a war zone of doubt and silence. Finally, he showed up at my tiny apartment, in the rain, soaked, out of breath, wild-eyed. "Don't believe what you saw," he said, the moment. I opened the door. I didn't invite her. She cornered me there. The photo. It's misleading. I stood still, unsure whether to believe him or my broken gut. "Why didn't you return my calls?" He looked down. I didn't know what to say. I knew how it would look. I didn't want to hurt you. "You already did." He stepped forward. "I didn't fall for Camille. I fell for you. The girl who sat in the wrong wedding seat and ended up flipping my whole life upside down." My tears were silent. "Hot. But you didn't even tell me you were going to the gala." That hurts more than the picture. He nodded. You're right. I was trying to protect you by keeping you out of that circle, but I should have let you choose whether to walk through that fire. We stood in the hallway, the rain still falling. Behind him, both of us soaked in a storm of mistakes. I closed the door slowly. Not in anger, in heartbreak. And that night, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. I was falling in love with a man who still lived with ghosts. For days, I kept my distance, went back to sketching in my corner cafe, avoided the social feeds, and ignored the buzz. But then something unexpected happened. Julian's assistant emailed me, just one line. You should see this. Attached was a proposal for a foundation, the Elise Project, named after his mother, a non-profit that would fund free art therapy for underprivileged youth, women healing from abuse, and young girls struggling with self-worth. And at the bottom of the proposal, in small, bold letters, creative. Director, there was a note handwritten. When you walked into that art room in Queens, I saw the girl my mom always hoped I'd marry. Not perfect, not polished, but powerful in ways the world doesn't always notice. The world needs what's inside you. So do I. I cried for what? Felt like an hour, and then I ran. Not from him. To him. Back to the place where everything had started. The garden where that wedding took place. He was there, standing by the very seat I'd accidentally taken weeks ago. Why here? I asked. He smiled, eyes warm with something deeper than love. Because every fairy tale deserves a full circle. We stood there, beneath the same flowering arbor where I'd once sat shaking, red-faced, certain I had embarrassed myself beyond recovery. But now the air between us was different, charged, yet steady. Julian took my hand slowly, not like a man pulling someone in, but like someone asking, "Are you ready for the rest of the truth? Come with me," he said. We didn't take his usual sleek town car or private ride. He insisted on walking. Past cobblestone alleys, through city noise and neon blur, until we reached a quiet building tucked behind an art museum. It wasn't flashy. No guards, no marble, just a keypad and a nameplate, E. Cross Youth Center. Elise Cross, I whispered. His mother. He nodded. She built this place when she had nothing. She cleaned floors by night and taught poetry workshops by day. Said no one should grow up believing their voice didn't matter. Inside, the hallway buzzed with life. Laughter. Paintings made from broken bottle caps and chalk murals streaked across the walls. It smelled like crayons and hope. This place saved me, Julian said quietly. When I was 17, I got arrested for trying to steal an old laptop from a pawn shop. Mom didn't scold me. She brought me here. I turned to look at him. Really look. And for the first time, I saw the pieces that had built him. Not wealth or charm or business genius, but fire, redemption, roots. I worked the front desk, taught coding classes in exchange for my community service. Every Saturday, my mom would make me read a poem aloud in the garden to the kids. He chuckled. I hated it. But she said if I could find my own rhythm, I could survive anything. She was right, I whispered. We stood before a mural of a tree, its trunk formed from photographs. Kids hugging volunteers, Julian as a teen, holding a laptop, grinning. My mom died. 2 months before I made my first million, he said. I built everything in her name. But somehow, the closer I got to success, the more I lost the version of myself she loved most. He turned to me then, his eyes vulnerable in a way I'd never seen. Until you. Those words shattered me. In the best way. It was easy to believe Julian Cross was made of titanium and vision boards. But now I understood. He was stitched together by loss, love, and a mother's belief that broken boys can become whole men. I need you to know, he added, voice low. None of this was a game. Not the wedding, not our dinners, not the project. You walked into my life like a misdialed miracle, and you reminded me what it means to be real. Tears slid down my cheek before I could stop them. Not because I was sad, but because for the first time, I finally saw the truth. I wasn't just some shy girl who had lucked into a fairy tale. I was part of the reason it existed. Later that night, back at my place, I couldn't sleep. I thought about how far we'd come, from that awkward moment with lemon cake on my shoes to standing in the building that had cradled his childhood. I opened my sketch pad, and for the first time, I didn't just draw him, I drew us. Two people from wildly different worlds, both bruised by loss, both shaped by silence, both reaching desperately for something that felt like a future. The next morning, I brought him the drawing. He didn't say a word. He framed it. Hung it in the main hallway of the new non-profit office we were building together. Every donor, every investor, every volunteer who walked in saw it, and beneath it, he added a tiny plaque that read, "Built from a wrong turn and the right heart." Meetings followed. Launch events. Our foundation made headlines not because of his name, but because of what we were doing. We weren't giving handouts. We were building bridges. Still, not everything was smooth. Some of his board members didn't like me, said I wasn't refined enough or public-friendly. One of them even pulled me aside and said, "You don't look like a CEO's partner. You look like the help." I blinked back the sting and smiled. "I was the help," I said. "And you know what? That means I know how to lift people up." Julian heard about it later. He fired her, publicly, told every staffer, every investor. "In this company, we don't belittle roots. We water them." The media swarmed after that. Who is the mystery woman melting the cross-empire? From wedding crash to empire queen, the girl who changed Julian Cross. I hated the headlines, not because they weren't flattering, but because they missed the point. This wasn't about a girl changing a man. It was about two people discovering that real power isn't in money or fame or flawless press releases. It's in seeing someone and staying, especially when it's messy, especially when it's terrifying, especially when it feels undeserved. One night, as we watched the city from his balcony, Julian pulled a tiny velvet box from his coat. My heart skipped. But it wasn't a ring, it was a key. "To your studio," he said. "I bought a building in Queens, floor-to-ceiling windows, natural light. It's yours, to teach, to paint, to dream out loud." I opened the box and stared at the key like it was sacred, because it was. It wasn't just a gift, it was permission. To belong, to build, to become. And for someone who had spent her whole life tiptoeing around rooms and whispering her ideas into journals, it was the loudest declaration of love I had ever known. The day I returned to that same grand venue, the one with marble columns and overflowing peonies, I didn't stumble in by accident. This time I was invited. The woman greeting guests at the door nodded warmly as I passed. She didn't ask for my name. She knew who I was. Everything looked the same. The sweeping staircase, the soft cello music, the glittering chandeliers. But I had changed. I wasn't hiding behind my hair or scanning for exits. I stood tall in a soft silk gown that hugged me like it had been waiting just for me. My curls were tucked behind my ears, not to disappear, but to show I wasn't afraid of being seen anymore. Julian waited at the altar. No tuxedo this time. A tailored dark blue suit, his mother's poetry pin at the collar. No audience of skeptical elites, just the people who had walked beside us, kids from the youth center, staff from the kitchen where I used to clean dishes. My old art teacher, the one who once told me, "Your gift isn't your sketching, it's the way you see what others don't." I walked down the aisle alone. By choice, I didn't need to be given away. I wasn't being transferred like property. I was showing up, whole, willing, chosen. Julian's eyes never left mine. Not when I stepped onto the flower-strewn path. Not when I reached him and took his hand. Not when the officiant said, "You may now speak your vows." He cleared his throat and smiled, the kind that told you it came from bone-deep gratitude. "I spent my whole life climbing," he said, "chasing, winning, but nothing has made me feel more grounded than meeting you. You didn't just walk into my world, you changed its rhythm. You showed me that power isn't in having, it's in holding, in seeing, in staying." He paused. "You sat at the wrong wedding. But in doing so, you brought me to the right life." There wasn't a dry eye in the room, and when it was my turn, I didn't need a script. I looked into his eyes and said, "I used to think I was too quiet to be remembered, that I could only watch, not belong. But you saw the girl in the back row, the one no one picked. And you didn't just pick her. You made her your equal, your partner, your bride." Then, almost laughing through the tears, I added, "I guess sometimes the wrong turn leads to the only place that ever felt like home." He kissed me, gently, reverently, like I was a vow made flesh. The crowd erupted, the violins swelled. But in my heart, everything went still, because I finally knew who I was. Not just the girl who once cleaned bathrooms or sketched in secret, not even just Julian's wife, was a woman who had rebuilt herself from whispers and watched her story reshape a world. In the months that followed, we didn't retreat into luxury. We built. We opened a new art and tech center for teens, with a full scholarship program for students from underserved neighborhoods. We launched a mentorship initiative pairing CEOs with first-generation college students. And I started teaching again, this time, not in silence. I stood before rooms full of bright-eyed dreamers and told them, "Being soft doesn't make you small. Being quiet doesn't mean you don't belong. You don't have to shout to make a mark. You just have to show up and stay standing." The press called it the Quiet Empire. I laughed at that, because they didn't see the full picture. This wasn't just about quiet, it was about choosing to speak when it mattered most, about understanding that love doesn't roar, it roots, and power isn't about owning the room, it's about inviting others in. One evening, months after the wedding, I walked back to that same bench in the garden of the venue, the one I first sat on, panicking in heels and clutching a place card I'd stolen. Julian joined me, handing me a cup of hot cocoa. "Do you remember what I said to you that day?" he asked. I smiled. "You asked if I was okay. And when I said no, you said, 'Good, because you're not supposed to be.'" He laughed. "I was terrible at first impressions. You were honest." We sat in silence for a moment, the kind that doesn't beg to be filled. Then he pulled something from his jacket, a folded, slightly crumpled piece of paper, my original sketch of him, the one I left behind that day, the one I assumed was gone forever. "I kept it," he said. "It reminded me not of who I was, but of who I wanted to be." I traced the worn lines of the drawing, my old pencil strokes, my younger fear. Then I folded it back carefully and whispered, "Me too." Now, if you ask the world who I am, they'll tell you I married a billionaire, but that's not my story. My story is this: I sat at the wrong wedding. And a man who had everything realized he was missing something, me. And I realized I'd spent my life preparing for this. This version of myself who could lead with love, who could change lives with kindness, who could stand beside someone powerful and never feel small. Not because I was rescued, but because I was seen and loved and chosen. This isn't just a love story, it's a reminder to every quiet heart. Sometimes the world tries to seat you at the wrong table. Sometimes you walk into the wrong room. But if you stay, if you dare to stay, you might just find the right future waiting to call your name. And when it does, don't whisper, don't hide, walk forward, and say yes.